Hello, everyone. Welcome to a live conversation with Bond180 on facilitating digital assets. And today we're going to interview the company who is a data-driven Corda DLT-enabled Fintech spun-out of University of Cambridge. Their mission is to support investment businesses to access a better supply of tailored assets. The entrepreneurs and residents here are three, and they're using Corda DLT in their solution. And also Bond180 is currently building towards the seed round. So today I will introduce Parth Shukla, who is a co-founder and CTO at Bond180. Parth was previously working in consultancy for 5 years, and he lived in 4 countries, visited 50 cities in a single year, and he's also a guitar player and sci-fi nerd. Hi, Parth.
Hi, Rina. Thank you for having us here. Great to talk to all of the audience.
And we're also interviewing Igor Lobanov, who is Chief Architect in Bond180. He has more than 20 years of experience in principal engineering and architectural positions. Igor is from Siberia, and while he's living in London, he misses sun and snow from Siberia. And guys, apparently I didn't know, but Novosibirsk, Igor's hometown, has almost twice as many sunny days than in London. And when he was young, he wanted to be a fashion designer, but there were no fashion schools in Tech, so he ended up with the computers. Hi, Igor.
Hi, guys.
So shall we start our interview? Parth, if you could tell us who you are and when and how did you start?
Great. Thank you for that question. I have to thank R3 really for giving us this platform and this opportunity. And if you guys have, for the audience benefit, we're an early stage startup. We have been going at it for almost over a year. And as you said, Irina, during the introduction, this was really a project and a product built out of the University of Cambridge and R3's sort of collaboration. So I'll give you a brief history about myself and then sort of go into what the history of Bond180 is. So I, as you mentioned rightly, was a career consultant. So I have a degree in computer engineering from Purdue in the United States. After which, like any engineering grad, I wanted to build cool things. So I decided to work for Deloitte Digital in the States, where I worked out of their Chicago and San Francisco offices. My experience was mainly in B2B and B2C e-commerce, building complex digital solutions, sort of working as a backend developer, designing systems for corporations like Ray-Ban, Chevron in the States. After that, I decided to move to Germany just to get a flavor of the European life. Lived in a city called Düsseldorf in Western Germany and worked for Deloitte over there as well. Sort of did similar work related to B2B and B2C e-commerce. After that, I decided to pursue an MBA at the University of Cambridge, which is where sort of the whole Bond180 idea was sort of born. I'll pause there and I'll see if you want to introduce my colleague here, and we can go on from there.
Yeah, I'll briefly introduce myself as well before we jump into the company. So we do have 3 co-founders, but I'm actually not a co-founder. I've joined relatively recently. I'm employee number 1 of Bond180, so to speak. Before joining Bond180, I worked with Legal & General, investment management business of Legal & General for quite a few years. And most recently, I was the chief architect of the business, which gave me a pretty good overview and understanding of capital markets, which is quite important in what we do here, but also had an opportunity to play around with some of the emerging technologies. And when I left at the end of last year, I had an itch to do something entrepreneurial and build something cool and unprecedented, and preferably with some of the emerging technologies I really enjoyed playing with, like blockchain. And when I came across the opportunity to work with the guys, I immediately jumped on it because I felt this is something that could end up being quite impressive if we do this right. This is how I joined, and since January I've been part of the team, and Parth and I are primarily working on building out the MVP for our platform. But I'll hand it over to Parth to talk a bit more about this.
Great. So since Igor has given a brief background about himself, excuse me, I'll jump sort of straight into how the company of Bond180 sort of came into being. It's a very interesting story because the three of us, the three co-founders, Philip Holbrook, Connor Devaney, and myself, we all met at Cambridge University, as I mentioned, during the MBA course that we decided to pursue. This was back in 2018. And Philip, who's our CEO, has had a vast experience working in the City of London for big asset management businesses. So he really understood from his work experience what the pain points facing the asset management investment industry at scale were through his work experience. When we got onto the MBA, our course was full of challenging opportunities. And one such opportunity was to do consulting projects with big companies. And R3 was fortunately one of those. And R3 sponsored a use case study on how DLT and Corda specifically could solve pain points within the investment industry. Philip had this idea that asset managers, investors, should directly be able to drive their demand in the market. There is a big problem right now in the market that most asset managers have a scarcity of quality assets that they can source and invest in. He understood that through his work, and that was sort of one of his main ideas as part of that consulting project for R3. And really to be able to use DLT as a means of issuance of debt assets. Now, after this consulting project sort of ended, Philip, Connor, and myself decided to participate in R3's university pitch competition held in April 2019, in which we came first with the initial concept of Bond180. Through that, we were given a small sum of money as support from R3, and we were invited to be entrepreneurs and residents in R3's London offices during summer of 2019, so exactly a year ago. We decided to take that opportunity, and we knew we were taking big risks because we were off sort of finishing our MBAs. It's not a cheap degree, but we decided to take that risk because we believed in the idea and the concept. We initially were able to secure funding from the University of Cambridge in the form of a small development finance fund directly from the university. And since then, we've sort of been going at it and really been trying to innovate in this space. We decided to build out our initial prototype, which is basically a reverse enquiry engine. And in sort of layman speak, it's a way for investment businesses to directly interact with the sell side. We initially worked on this prototype for a period of about 4 to 5 months, starting from July of 2019. And by December 2019, we had developed the solution. What we initially were focused on was getting customer feedback from big investment businesses. And we went and talked to a lot of these institutions through Phil and our mutual network in the city. Upon talking to our potential clients, we realized that the proposition that we were pushing was needed a bit of finessing. And we decided to sort of use that opportunity to participate in a couple of accelerators. One of them is called Outlier Ventures, which is a big Web3 sort of blockchain-based accelerator in London. We participated in their Basecamp flagship accelerator based out of London. And we also are part right now, as Igor had mentioned earlier, of the F10 accelerator, which is sponsored by Six and supported by R3. So we're part of their Singapore cohort. And we're doing it remotely, obviously, right now due to the whole COVID situation. But both of these accelerators have really helped us sort of finesse our proposition. And currently, we're building towards our MVP, which is due to be launched as a pilot to our potential customers in H2 of this year. So that's sort of a brief background of the company.
It's very, very exciting. Thank you, Parth and Igor. And our listeners, please, if you have any questions, put them in the live chat, and David will look at it, and he will ask our interviewers your questions. So could you please guys tell us what problems exactly are you trying to solve at Bond180?
Great. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, initially when we did the consulting project for R3, it was supposed to be an assessment of the applications of DLT for debt capital markets. Now, the investment industry in a broad sense is, I wouldn't say broken, but inefficient in the way it functions. And the reason for that is there's an asymmetry of information, and most investment managers whose job is to source investments for their portfolios and generate return are unable to do so. And the reason for this is simply because they are not able to understand the full breadth of opportunities that are out there in the market. There is, as I mentioned, information asymmetry, and there is also an inflexibility in the market towards the kind of assets that can be structured and then sort of sourced as part of investors' portfolio. So we're really trying to build a product that is a better means of origination and asset sourcing, and then ultimately execution for investment businesses. So our target clients are big multi-mandate asset managers who have extensive portfolios of over 1 billion AUM, 100 billion AUM, sorry. And these firms really want to seek quality investments. And we're really designing a broad product suite that helps them to source and then execute assets.
Mm-hmm. How does distributed ledger fit into this picture?
Great. So I will answer my take, and I think Igor definitely would like to add on. But in my view, distributed ledger is a profound technology in the sense that it enables the creation of virtual trust in a way. Corda specifically is a very powerful tool for allowing, mutually distrusting parties to transact with trust in a private way. We feel that whole concept of distributed trust and the ability to transact for two parties is something that is fundamental to any financial sort of workflow. And specifically in the case of debt capital markets, we feel that the more bespoke nature of transactions can be enabled through DLT, because a lot of the intermediaries that are involved in a regular transaction, they can optimize their processes through owning nodes and sharing information and actually managing the life cycle events that are involved with debt capital and debt assets. That's my take, and I'm sure Igor would like to add on to that.
Very briefly, I think, Parth, you've covered it all very eloquently. I wanted to add the fact that the administration of the life cycle of assets that are investable and could be invested in, this is what we're targeting specifically with Corda and with DLT in general. We're not looking to solve the problem of giving investors insight about the opportunities through this. This is more traditional market insights, data analytics approach. But when we're talking about creating a legally binding contract between two parties, and especially if we're talking about private assets, which are maybe more flexible and may require certain kind of conditions on them. If we're talking about doing them in an old-fashioned way, we're talking about appointing a custody bank, we're talking about appointing a registrar, and there are very sophisticated processes involved in doing that. We're looking to offer, as an option, we're not really looking to disrupt the whole industry, as an option to do this in a different way. And what we're creating is a digital assets capability to back it up. So if two parties agree to issue a debt, which is essentially a fixed income asset, we are able to facilitate that transaction on distributed ledger in a completely transparent way with guarantees that the asset behaves in the way it should behave, without appointing a lot of intermediaries to look after that, which brings down the cost of running those assets, the transactions with those assets, which ultimately improves the returns on the investment for the portfolios where these assets belong to, which in turn improves, say, returns on pensions or returns on your savings. That's ultimately where these benefits can come through for normal people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What kind of transactions are going to be processed on your platform?
Yep. So I'll again touch briefly, and I think Igor can complement me. So we are looking to record private bilateral transactions between entities which are of debt nature, basically. So we can send instructions to our IAN, which is our issuance administration network. It's the sort of Corda-based part of our application, and you can read about this more on our website. But what we basically envision is two parties willing to transact and willing to agree into a debt arrangement can basically issue that debt in the form of a smart contract and represent it on ledger using Corda. And then any sort of life cycle events related to the debt asset, including redemption, principal, various settlement events will be recorded on Corda, and we will allow settlement as well. And I'm sure Igor, you can add on to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring to life, maybe for people who are not familiar with fixed income and those assets, what we're talking about in terms of the life cycle events. So when a company borrows money from another company, and this is what that asset really is, is like a security describing an agreement to borrow money. There's typically something that's called coupon payment, which is either annually or maybe quarterly, maybe twice a year, a payment of interest accrued on that debt, which is paid out from the company that borrowed money to the company that lent money. And then at the end of the term for the debt, the principal, so the remainder amount, is paid back to the company which lent the money. So this is what we're talking when we're saying basic life cycle events. But there are things to get very interesting when we're talking about more complicated transactions, when say the actual interest rate for the debt is dependent on some external conditions, like economic performance, for example, of the country. So it may be linked to, say, inflation rate. This is where it gets more complicated, because you're not just sending fixed amount of money every 2 quarters. You need to calculate, and you need to calculate this in an indisputable way. So if, say, Bank of England publishes an official interest rate, or like another kind of indicator that you based your calculations on, then it needs to be incorporated into calculations in a trusted way, so the companies don't end up disputing whether they owe or they're supposed to receive a different amount. This is where we feel decentralized nature of distributed ledger allows to cut through a lot of operational overhead traditionally associated with making sure these sort of assets work. And that's we think that there's great potential for something like Corda, which is certainly designed with those use cases in mind.
So, how DLT is beneficial for this use case?
Well, you imagine that you base your calculations on a official rate that's published. If this is something that the companies independently need to calculate the interest rate that they're supposed to pay out or supposed to receive, they would do them independently. They duplicate processes. They have different systems doing that. They have different people making sure the systems operate, and they'll be twice as expensive to do. Whilst if we're talking about smart contracts, which can have this formula implemented in them in an indisputable way, it only happens once. And the data that this calculations is done is only presented once. So essentially, it creates a consistent record on both sides of the transaction, what is supposed to happen with that asset. And there's no need to mirror that process. There's no need to double check whether the other party did it exactly the same way, because it's the same logic, it's the same code that's executed on both sides, and the transactional platform guarantees the consistency. And this is just like the tip of the iceberg, because when you're typically talking about these sort of calculations, there's a whole raft of activities around that, like how do we reconcile whether the payments are supposed to be made or made? How do we deal with disputes when, say, you paid me 10 pence less than I've expected? All these things which take people's time because they need to write legal emails to each other, and it's all need to be documented. There's all the due procedure around that needs to be put in place, which all adds up pretty quickly, especially if a company like an investment management business has hundreds and thousands of transactions like that they need to administer. Maybe not making that much return on each one of them, but if imagine things going wrong quite frequently because it's people, and this is just information that is published and processed. So that's the inefficiency we're trying to tackle with the platform, with the use of distributed ledger.
All right, David, is there any questions from the audience?
There we go. So, Tom Reed asking, I don't know exactly how much we can do this here, but he asks if we can do a short demo of IAN and detail the life cycle events that are available with the MVP and kind of what corporate actions are actually available. So I don't know how much of that we can do here, but maybe if you guys would like to speak to it a little bit.
Definitely. I mean, Tom sounds like he's interested in the IAN product, and it's a fully functioning product that we have. So that's some demos are something we're very keen on sort of conducting for potential interested parties. And our website actually has a means for us, for the team, for anyone to sort of reach out to our team and sort of arrange those demos. So I would encourage anyone listening to sort of reach out to us. We have actually shown the IAN to very relevant stakeholders, some of whom are in the process of digitizing, and building digital exchanges, some very significant organizations, and they all have validated the thinking and the workflow and the way we've dealt with the problem. We would encourage Tom to sort of reach out to us, and we'd be happy to show him in more detail what lifecycle actions we are able to perform. Igor, I don't know if you want to add onto that.
I definitely agree with this sentiment. We're very happy to talk to whoever's interested in this and see what comes out. It's probably not practical to do demo in this interview. It's going to take a little while to explain what you're actually looking at, but we very much open.
Okay.
Thanks,
David,
perfect
is there
sense.
any more questions?
Yeah, so I got another one from Martin G. Will you be using smart contracts, or will you be using Corda smart contracts, or DAML, or Dion? And he's got a follow-up as well, but I'll leave it with that one to start.
So Martin, I've met Martin. He's a very good guy. He conducts the Corda Code Club, and that's an interesting question. So the question is basically, how are we approaching the authoring of our smart contract? In the current phase, we have used Kotlin as a mechanism to author our smart contracts, and we're aware of the alternatives that are out there in the market. So DAML, which Martin mentions, is basically digital asset by the company Digital Asset, and they have this very extensive markup language to author smart contracts in a very agnostic way, and it can run on multiple ledgers. We have explored sort of looking into that as well, and as our clients' need evolve, we would definitely be open to creating something on different, smart contracting languages. But again, we as a startup have to be driven by client requirements, and our clients are agnostic to how the smart contracts are authored. All they care about is from the interactions that we've had, is that the security is represented the correct way, and the automation and the lifecycle events are representing the legal agreement. Igor, I don't know if you want to add.
Yes, but just say something about the thought process of how we decided. So we're using bare bones Kotlin. That's what Corda's bread and butter for smart contracts. We believed that in the MVP stage, it's quite important for us to be nimble and flexible about the approach. So we took the path of least resistance. So both Parth and I were very comfortable with Kotlin. With Java background, with developers who spent lifetimes working in these technologies, pretty familiar to us. We also felt that it's more important to have something that we can easily incorporate into our continuous integration, continuous delivery lifecycle. So we have comprehensive coverage for unit tests for Kotlin, which is very easy to do because it's just Java, isn't it? And we're taking advantage of of Corda's, which I think is a pretty good decision initially for the Corda's architecture to capitalize on the rich ecosystem of tools available in the JVM space, and that's what we're doing. We completely open for more advanced and sort of more domain-specific languages like DAML and others for developing smart contracts. We just feel it's not quite the right time for us to go into this. This is more for when we start working with much more complicated types of securities and agreements. So we need more robust handling of those, and we'll be more. The trade-off would make sense. We'll get less comfort in terms of the tooling that we're comfortable with, but we'll know pretty certain that we need this sort of complexity and we need this sort of expressive power from more advanced tools. But at the moment, we're sticking to a fairly simple approach.
why did you choose a Corda in the first place? And if you consider like other DLTs, could you please mention them too?
Igor, I think that's
shall I take that? Yeah. In fact, it wasn't a straightforward decision for us initially. We looked at a number of different options. We felt it needs to be quite compatible with the way large institutions like asset managers would look at this. And I had experience with one of those, so I knew what's likely to be required. We ruled out anything that was based on a public blockchain, because that would mean that the privacy of transactions isn't there, which is a big deal in capital markets, because information of who's doing what is that's the key competitive advantage, and this is how we are successful, by successfully hiding your intent so people don't take advantage of you. We also ruled out things which are not necessarily public, but they're still based on a singular record in the form of a blockchain. So think like Hyperledger, for example, wouldn't really be a good fit here, because it's just a single blockchain. It has channels. Yeah, I agree there are some privacy controls, but they're not as flexible as what we saw in Corda. We realize that what we need is transaction level privacy. So we need people who are part of a transaction to know about this transaction and have record of the states that belong to this transaction, but we don't want to do anything to hide this from people who are not part of this transaction. It would have been a lot of work if we want to achieve this with something a bit more generic like Hyperledger, but for no added benefit. So Corda fit that requirement quite well, and that was the key reason why we looked into this. And the other important consideration for us was that we wanted to work with something that has an open source core and something that has a community around that, because these technologies are quite nascent. Well, let's face it, they may have bugs, they may have some uncertainties, and we considered a number of like closed source proprietary technologies for this, which seems to have similar capabilities, but we didn't feel comfortable just taking the plunge. We were like a very small team, a startup. We just didn't feel like we're going to get traction with the vendor for the platform that we require, that we need to be successful in what we do. So Corda hit both considerations pretty well, so that's why we stick to it.
Mm-hmm.
And to add on to that, R3 as an organization have been our supporters since the very beginning. So the commercial alignment also was there since the beginning, on top of all of the technological benefits.
Yeah. Thank you. Did you need to integrate like applications with Corda, and how easy was it to get data in and out from Corda?
Shall I take that?
Yes, Igor.
So I think this is a very famous requirement for anyone who's doing something with Corda. You always have something that sits outside. And in our case, what we realized is, Corda smart contracts is good and well, and this is your trusted and safe environment to actually do something with the digital assets that you control. But if you want to offer people access to what we actually have, or you want to integrate the processing of your transactions in digital assets with other systems, like for example, an asset manager would have a portfolio where they have traditional assets that are kind of somewhere in a custody bank, and they have digital assets which are in their Corda node. So they would need to bring them together to see how much they have in their portfolio and make decisions on that basis. So we absolutely need to open up Corda and offer a structured way of getting this information out. So what we ended up is we created an application we call Controller. It's IAM Controller, which is sitting next to Corda node, and it uses an interface of Corda to take information out. But what it does, the controller itself, it offers a standard API to access information that resides within the Corda node, so that the user interface, number of screens that we created as part of the controller, like a dashboard, could be presented to the user, or equally so, any systems that a client organizations like Asset Manager would have could also use these APIs to integrate with Corda. What our experience with getting Corda open and access its data, it is it relies on RPC. It relies on relatively narrow pipe. So you can do pretty much everything you want through this pipe, but you are constrained to use a Java-based client for that. So Corda doesn't offer like REST APIs or any APIs to speak of other than the Corda RPC. And we didn't really want to use Java for middle tier, and we didn't want to use Java for the front end because that's not what it's good for. So we actually wanted to use technologies which we feel would be more productive when we're developing the integration hub and the user interface. So we had to build something we call it Gateway. We had to build a technology that sits between Corda and the controller, and it converts the Corda RPC into a set of APIs that we can access easily. We feel this is a missing capability in Corda stack, and we developed it as much as we needed just to make the technology work, that makes the stack operational. But this is something that we feel if someone does in a very generic way, it would be a great complement to the Corda capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Do you host your nodes, and if you could tell more how you do it and which environment are you running it on?
So maybe Igor, I can give a brief intro and you can follow up with that. So currently what we have for the IAN part is we have a way to automatically spin up nodes on the cloud and to operate those nodes as part of our own business network for Corda. We did this because we wanted really a way to test out basically the running of Corda nodes on the cloud and basically build out an automated deployment process. We've done that pretty successfully. So we have created a automated way to basically deploy and manage our Corda infrastructure in our entire network. We use technologies like Terraform, and we use serverless architecture in terms of the backend. We use graph query language in terms of getting the data to the front end. So we effectively, the reason why we sort of built out this whole cloud-based automated deployment was because we knew that once we actually get to production, our actual clients, being big investment businesses, would probably, in our view, would not want to host their own nodes. And we were sort of aware of both possibilities. So we designed it in a way that we could handle either scenarios. So in case if our potential clients have existing Corda nodes and existing networks that they're part of, then we have mechanisms for them to basically install our Corda app and for them to basically be able to communicate with other participants who are running our Corda app. And in case our potential client does not want to host their node, we have a full automated deployment and DevOps delivery plan where we can actually spin up a node for them and manage all of its interactions and make it part of our business network. So this was basically the thought in terms of hosting a node. And we don't run a node. We run a node as a Bond180 organization in terms of our network to sort of validate and verify certain transaction level details. But yeah, so that's, I think I covered both of your questions. Right? If we run a node, and then what's the plan? I don't know if Igor, you want to add more nuance around the decision making. Yeah.
Yes, I'll cover the cloud part because I think it's quite important there. What it gives us, initially when we started thinking about how do we do the IAN, the backend for the IAN, how do we deal with Corda nodes and how do we deal with the network, we realized that if we are to do what we set out to do, we got to be quite aggressive on the cloud native front. So we've got to use capabilities of cloud providers, which accelerate us. I worked in a very traditional organization where cloud was very much an extension of a traditional data center, and you have an army of people going through the motions of when you need a new virtual server, it needs to be configured and everything. It just wouldn't work in our case. So this is why we adopted approaches like infrastructure as code and managed services we use quite extensively. So we're trying to minimize the amount of infrastructure we need to manage and the amount of configuration that we need to do manually. So everything is code, everything is scripted. And Terraform is one of the tools that allows us to do this, but We use AWS as our primary cloud, and we use a lot of native tools in there. So we for example, use Cognito for user authentication. We use DynamoDB for some of the backend storage, which is not related to Corda. We use RDS where we have to use a relational database. A number of things. We use Amplify, for example, for our front-end stack. What we found is this approach, when we actively try to reduce the amount of code we manage and infrastructure we configure, allows us to travel very fast, and which is crucial for a startup. But it also has an added benefit. We can say, well, if you don't want to run your node, we're going to do this for you. We have it all scripted. It's all automated. It's just easy for us. And by the way, when I'm saying easy, it's actually secure. I don't need to log in I don't need access to my production machines. It's all scripted. I never log into the node. I don't need to. It works. So it's both efficient and secure. But if the client wants to run their own nodes and have their own ability to do that, a lot of financial services organizations now adapted cloud to some extent. Okay, maybe not AWS, maybe Azure, but essentially what we can offer is a set of Terraform scripts, which have everything they need to set up their own mini IAN, a copy of the IAN in their environment, and have the nodes connecting to our network. It's the same technology that we created internally to manage our own infrastructure, could be just part of what we deliver. And in fact, there's not that much IP for us in that sort of technology. That's something that we very much open to give to other people to say, well, this is how you do this. This is how we've done it. In fact, if you find a better way of doing that, we're going to take it back and learn from you. This DevOps is very much empowering on every direction we may pursue with making the service broadly available.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, super interesting. So are you planning to join Corda network, or you want to create your own?
Shall I take that, Parth?
Yeah, please go ahead.
This is where probably honest answer is we keeping our options open on that front. Corda network is a great thing. I honestly believe this is like a stroke of genius to come up with this global compatibility zone. But the time for it hasn't come yet. There's not that many people on that network and not that many Corda apps that you can compose together. We're very much open to be part of that ecosystem, but we have to be client-led on that front because we are not part of a transaction. We are facilitating transactions through our technology, but we're not really issuing assets, so we're not buying assets. We have relatively little say on that. Clients need to see advantage of that, and they need to be willing to be part of global compatibility zone where our Corda app could be part of it and work alongside other Corda apps. If they express this desire, we're very happy to get their nodes running inside that network, and we're happy to be certified and whatever is required to be admitted to this network. If initially maybe clients be more guarded about that and willing to keep things in a bit more private way, which we have indication to think that's going to be the case for now, then we will keep it private. But the option to then migrate to a different compatibility zone is always going to be there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how users can access your system, and do they have to run a node? Like you told that you can run for them, right? But did you build any features that let users to access it via their account?
Yeah. So I can answer that initially, and obviously Igor, please jump in. So I'll answer that one by one. So we are building a multifaceted sort of application. The issuance administration network is one component of what we're building. And if you see on our website, again, we have two other components that sort of precede the IAN Corda-based application, which are more centralized in nature, and they are non-DLT in effect. So those are and that's sort of where the asset origination and asset scarcity problem for investment businesses is really solved. So those are called the demand management system is that product's name. And that's a web-based SaaS tool where investors can log on, and we have some integration in terms of we get their data, but what they're able to see is basically a visualization of their needs and an ability to sort of source quality investments. once they are able to do that through this online tool, they then seamlessly can, if they want to, issue digital assets using the IAN component. And that is where really our clients would need to have a node. And as Igor has very eloquently mentioned before, we have a number of options in terms of how we want our clients to run that DLT node. And if Igor, if you want to add anything further on that as well.
I think you said it all.
Yeah, cool.
How many moves in this platform? Do you connect to existing like payment rails? Are you going to introduce a token, or are you going to use like token SDK, which is Corda made?
I'll take that initially.
Yeah.
Feel free to chip in. I think this is quite important, right? So yes, we're talking about assets, but there have to be money changing hands at some point. We did initial analysis on this landscape when we started working on the IAN in Anger, and we realized there isn't really a clear leader in the cash on ledger space yet. So what we realized at the back of that exercise is two things. Firstly, we need to support a way of moving value around, money around, which doesn't require DLT, and that's what we did. I'll talk about this in a minute. And then the other thing, once there's going to be emergence of solutions for cash on ledger, there's going to be a number, and probably going to be different solution that's preferred in different jurisdictions. So it may be different client segments. So we need to offer multiple options on that front. So we came up with this principle, and we debated quite a lot about how far do we need to go to support this. Parth and I debated this, but essentially we call it multi-protocol settlement. So we have this notion of client nodes negotiating which way they actually want to settle the transaction based on their preferences and the risk attitude and other considerations. But then they're always going to have a fallback to traditional payment rails. And in that case, what we did is we created a workflow for payment. Payment is requested, then the other organization is alleging the payment that is made through traditional payment infrastructure, and then it's confirmed by the other organization. And this confirmation, that's what ensures the DVP semantics for the settlement. So we're not moving value on the ledger, but we're building on the effectively legally binding confirmation that the money is in the bank to enact the delivery leg of the settlement, which is fairly robust. And this is how it's done in many cases anyway. But this, we digitized it. It is driven by the workflow. This workflow cannot be violated because it's Corda. It ensures the states can follow each other in a natural succession. And this is largely inspired by the settler SDK that Corda offered. We didn't use that code, but we built something which is very closely follows that pattern. But once we see, and we're starting conversations on that front with a number of people. We want to see digital cash, but which shape it's going to take, we don't know. It's going to be maybe going to be some variation of like a central bank digital currency. It may be something like I don't know, some like a basket of currencies that underpin some kind of a stable coin. We'll work with whatever options available, but again, we'll be client-led on those options which they're most comfortable with to express their settlement obligations, and we'll support those, and we definitely support the mechanism for making it clear in an automated way how these two nodes and this particular transaction are going to be exchanging value.
Mm-hmm. David, is there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, so I have a bunch. I'm going to see if we can maybe get through them. I'll start with Miles, since I took questions from some of these other people before, so we'll start with him. Great to hear of your progress here, guys. Might we see a Bond180 powered issuance this year?
Yep, that's a very good question. I can take that on. So Miles and our startup have had a long history. So their startup Lab 577 is a fellow participant in the EIR program, and yeah, I mean that's a great question. So the IAN network is ready to be deployed and functional. As I said earlier, we've shown it to several major financial institutions, including major infrastructure players and major asset management businesses. and we've been appreciated for the way we've handled sort of the workflow around what Igor just mentioned, the whole allegement confirmation flow that we've built out. In fact, we have had like significant commercial interaction with a alternative financial institution based out of London, and we're in talks with them. So hopefully there should be. I'm not going to quote on timelines, but we're confident that we'll be able to utilize the IAN for something meaningful. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else do I have here? A follow-up from Martin. How has the market reacted to your solution? Do they anticipate any market resistance to using a new technology like this?
Yep. Again, that's very true. Is that the whole question, or was there...
That is the whole question. There's a few other ones from Martin, but that's the first one.
Okay. Great. No, so that's a very valid concern, and I think that's not a hidden fact in the industry. Everyone knows that DLT is a nascent technology, and that major institutions are cautious in how and when they deploy it. And we initially, when we started this idea, were very sort of fervent about adoption of DLT in an immediate sort of timeline by major financial institutions. But through our conversations, through commercial and advice from our very experienced advisor panel, we came to realize that we need to be sort of astute in terms of what DLT is used for as a solution. And henceforth, we settled upon using DLT as a means of recording settlements rather than actually transacting value on ledger and reacting to the market. So my answer to that is that we have technology that is state of the art and does use DLT to the way it is supposed to. But our initial go-to-market strategy is independent of DLT. And as I mentioned earlier, the DMS and the 180 match system that we have are sort of our real sort of ways to get clients to be comfortable with our stack. And IAN is definitely an option at the periphery of the process.
And also was bringing up again what Parth said earlier. I think this is a really good point to that question as well, is if clients are willing to use our full stack to solve their asset sourcing problems, and they're not comfortable using DLT, we could hide that fact from them, and we can run their node on their behalf, and it'll be just exactly as the software as a service model that they can learn to love. And only at the point where they are ready to embrace the additional flexibility and additional benefits of actually running their own node in the network, we'll be giving it away for them to take forward. But we absolutely cognizant of this gentle ramp up of the technology that actually, frankly speaking, scares some people.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Last one, I'll punt to you guys from Tom again. You spoke of coupon payments. This might have been a little while ago. How are you performing the payments, i.e., how are you doing the cash lay?
I think we've covered that in a subsequent conversation. Essentially, well, they're always going to be cash lag, and they always, just to summarize, and they always going to need to move value via the ledger. Initially, we are not doing that. We're just making sure the obligations are to move cash, so to speak, using traditional payment mechanisms like banking payment rails are tracked in an indisputable way, in an audited way. Once there's a take on for digital cash and the regulation become more warm to that, we'll start supporting this in the form of like a tokenized cash and ledger. If we need to be part of the global compatibility zone to do that, that will be obvious requirement that forces our client's hand to do that. If we can do this in the private setup, then we also explore whether this is a palatable option.
Awesome, thank you. Irina, that would be the last one from me that I've got, so I can punt back. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, we kind of like covered all aspects that we wanted to cover, and yeah, if you guys want to talk about some like more projects
Yep. I think I'll just like sort of summarize our progress up to date, and sort of give you like our next.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So obviously, R3's relationship with our outfit is really, a testament to how R3 are sort of trying to push the development of new ventures within their ecosystem and the adoption of Corda. And I feel, from the very start of this journey for us, R3 have supported us and continue to do so. So Igor, who's the head of the venture corporate development program, has been very instrumental since he joined in sort of connecting us and helping us out. And we're really thankful to broadly the R3 community. The months that we spent quite a bit of time in the R3 offices in London, and we really enjoyed our time over there. Sort of interacting with many other startups who are working in the space. And it's an exciting journey for us, and where we really want to get to this year as an objective for our startup is that we really want to further finesse our technology in terms of the assets origination and sourcing problem. We want to introduce better analytics and better intelligence, and really make it a compelling suite that the buy side, the asset management industry, finds attractive as a way to solve their needs. We have ambitious goals for the next year or so. We're, as you said in the introduction, looking to raise a seed round as well early next year. We're always open to conversations with potential customers, potential people who are interested in following our journey. So I'd encourage you guys to follow our LinkedIn and have conversations with us. So.
Yeah, and
Igor,
we also,
sorry.
I think you've covered that all very well. I'd say that I really enjoy the nature of the challenge that we set for ourselves, and as a team, we've definitely grown into that challenge, so to speak. It feels really good to try to create something leading edge in the capital market space, because this industry has been, how might I respect it? It's been quite slow in adopting technologies. For a good reason. And it feels like we want to leave a lasting impact on that industry, and it feels good to be part of it.
Yeah, our venture development team does like amazing job, and Igor is super with his like experience. He helps a lot. Yeah. I wanted to thank our guests, Igor and Parth, today for their time and for answering all our questions. Thank you guys, and from me and David, we are like part of the developer evangelist team. We will do another interview soon, but please join us for next interviews. And thank you very much, Igor and Parth. Bye bye.
Thank you, Irina.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks very much.